Hello, my name is Andre Koen. I want to say thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. And today we're going to talk a little bit about this nuance of privilege because sometimes people get privilege confused and they think, well, either I have privilege or I don't have privilege. I've worked for everything that I've had. I have how can you even say that I have privilege when I don't recognize it? I don't experience it. I don't even know what you're talking about, right? And so one of the things that I want to be really clear about is the fact that we all have privilege. We all have privilege, right? And so there are two ways to think about the privileges that we have. So as an example, my name is Andre, and that's my government name. But my friends, my really close friends, sometimes they call me Dre. And some of them even go as far as even my frenemies sometimes call me Dr. Dre, right? And so there are certain things that as Andre or as Dre or as Dr. Dre that give me some privilege that is both earned and unearned, right? So if I went to a institution like Mayo Clinic and they say, they call me Dr. Dre. So I'm ready to scrub up. Let's get ready to do some heart surgery. They would say no. As a matter of fact, I may be escorted off the property. Right? Because I am trying to use some privilege that I have not earned. Right? And so there is this notion of earned privilege. So what is earned privilege? Those are the knowledge, the skills, the abilities that you've acquired. For some of us, it's degrees. For some of us, it's having a unique skill or ability. But these are things that we have earned the right to do, to be, to say. We've worked hard for those things, right? So there are earned privileges. And then there are unearned privileges. And typically those unearned privileges are things that more than likely we don't have a whole lot of control over, right? So whether I am so-called able-bodied or so-called disabled or whatever, I didn't have any real control over that. And so there are privileges that are attached to that. And, many of you did not grow up in my community. So when we go to my community, I have some unearned privilege that you won't have, given that you don't know the streets, the blocks, the neighbors, and so forth and so on, right? So there are these earned privileges and these unearned privileges. The other part of privilege is this notion that there are things that are that burdens that people carry with that privilege, right? And so, or burdens that have to be overcome to have access to that privilege. And so, as an example, oftentimes there are obstacles or challenges that people have to overcome that sometimes may appear or seem to be a burden. Right? Simultaneously, there are pieces of privilege that may also seem a burden, whether they're earned or unearned. And so one example was that I was always, my grandparents talked about this, that you have to work double hard or you have to accomplish twice as much as other people to be seen just as equal. And I would say that is a burden that was probably unnecessary for a kid, but I think I've turned out pretty well. Right. And so there are other communities that get the opportunity to operate unburdened. Right. And so when I think about privilege as a male, there are some privileges that I'm offered that I'm unburdened by. Right. As an example, all things considered, I can park any place that I want and not necessarily be concerned about my physical safety, right? So, all things considered, keeping your head on a swivel, your wits about you, and whatnot. But I don't have to be overly concerned about my physical safety, parking at any time of the night, any place. However, my sisters, women that I know, females that I know, don't oftentimes have the burden of having to think about that, right? And so this notion of privilege comes earned and unearned, and it is also signified by who carries burdens and who is able to be unburdened. Right? And so we'll talk more about this notion of privilege and how that impacts the workplace and our relationships in the workplace, and our ability to increase our discretionary effort becomes crucial when we talk about this notion of privilege. And so we'll come back. We'll talk more about that in our next episode. Thank you so much for joining us for this session, and we'll talk more about this notion of privilege.